some of the sound, I guess. Now, I was going to ask you about that on the phone earlier. I was going to ask you about that on the phone earlier, how the piano was, but well, here we are with the 13 volts.
Good afternoon. Welcome. We gather today to do sacred work together. We gather today to honor the memory of Marshall Levine. We gather today to mourn his absence from us in body, and we gather today to celebrate a long life well lived. We gather together because the work of grief is not solo work, but a group project. The work of creating a life is a group project. Making family, making up a church, and living well and decently. And so today we gather in this house of celebration, and let it first of all be a house of celebration. We gather in this house of memory. Let it be a place where we remember. Remember in the sense of drawing up that which is from our past that feeds us in the present. Remember in the sense of that which we have been given, that is that which equips us to go into the future. And to remember in the sense of bringing the members of this community together, bringing the members of this family together. That's the work we're doing here today. It's sacred work, and I'm grateful that you're all here, and I'm grateful that this place is where you've chosen to hold this workshop of remembering and celebrating. Marshall is a longtime member of this church, a beloved member of this community, and part of its life force. So in the same way he has animated your families, your friendships, your own lives, he has brought the gift of his presence and his wisdom to this house and played a part in making us who we are. The heart of our service today, in addition to beautiful music that would delight Marshall, are your memories, your feelings, your testimony. And so these are the few words you'll hear from the minister of the church today. And knowing that my time in this pulpit is fleeting, I wish to say that when I stand up on behalf of Marshall and convene today, I have in my mind the gift of the conversations I had with him over the last 2 years together. I remember the conversations about Marshall and his relationships and how important it was to be connected, to have friends, to belong, how important the people in his life were to him, and how he wanted to use his time to connect more deeply with others. I remember the day, and Marshall booked an hour, maybe 2 hours. It was a good chunk of time in my office to talk about what he saw as the work, the dutiful work of living and making a difference in other people's lives. How it might be possible just for one person to reach out and to help someone get over the hump that they face, move on to the next level, have a life that they dreamt of but didn't yet have, and with a little help, a little money, a little friendship, they might be helped along in their journey. And he looked at me, he said, "Isn't that a sort of thing a church could do? Couldn't we do that sort of thing? See people, come into relationship with them and help them along their way." It was a fabulous moment where we, in each other in this conversation, discovered what the meaning of church making was and what the meaning of friendship could be if you invested yourself with compassion in the lives of other people. So as we convene, I hope we do so in that spirit of compassion, that spirit of helping each other along in the journey in the manner that the legacy of Marshall Levine suggests. And so, friends, let us now celebrate a life and life together. I'd like to invite Alice today. You can't do it wrong.
That's wrong. Sorry.
I'm going to say some words if it's okay. As we light this chalice, may we be reminded here of our highest aspirations and inspired to bring our gifts of love and service to the altar of humanity. May we know once again that we are not isolated beings, but connected in mystery and miracle to the universe, to this community, and to each other. Amen. Thank you. I'd now like to invite Dan into the pulpit for some opening words. Yes.
I grew up in the church, got married right over there. I met Reverend David for the first time a few minutes ago, and he described himself as my wingman. And I've always wanted a wingman. Never knew how to get one. I'm going to try to make it through this. It's brief, but I don't want the brevity to conflate the gravity. So first I want to thank you for coming and welcome you. I'd like to share a few remarks about my dad. And I think of this as an expression of forgiveness. The story starts with Sigrid's chairs. Where's my mom? Sigrid's chairs were in the kitchen. I never thought about Sigrid the person, but the phrase Sigrid's chairs were burned into my brain, probably the way kids learn language. See something, what's it called? Sigrid's chairs. I later learned that Sigrid was a mutual friend of Mom and Dad. Mom and Dad first met in Sigrid's apartment in Boston at Sigrid's party. The guests arrived around 3 in the afternoon, and Sigrid served drinks and what she thought were her prized appetizers. Marshall arrived hungry and ready for dinner. He devoured his portion and convinced Mom to bring him seconds and thirds. We don't know the full story. He charmed her, and they later married after a short engagement. The point of this story is not to illustrate how my brother and I came to be. This story illustrates that my dad lived his life following a string of personal agendas. In this story, his agenda was dinner. He lived his life, and in fact, he propelled his life by creating agendas. There are a few people in this world who would work as hard, who would push as hard to fulfill their own agenda. The fact that you are sitting here today is evidence to me that probably at some point in your life you have experienced one of Dad's agendas. I hope that experience was positive, because they were not always positive. As I reflect on Dad's life, I see a man who did great things, who had outstanding accomplishments, and made lots of friends. And those things would not have happened without that internal drive, without living his life by following his own agenda.
Thank you, Dan. I need these now. So as Dan said, first of all, thank you all for coming, to celebrate my father. He didn't really want a funeral. He felt like he had his funeral. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But I think it's so wonderful to be here and to remember him, and I really appreciate everybody here. I just wanted to say a special thanks to the musicians. Each of you, not just musicians, you were instructors for my father. You accompanied him, which was a tremendous challenge, because he liked to lead in everything he did. But so each of you in music was so important to him, and so thankful for you all to make the effort to be here. But so we got more wonderful music. We have some tears, which are going to keep flowing. There's going to be laughter, I am sure, and a lot of stories too. And you did not include it, but there will be refreshments, which was always my father's favorite part of coming to church. It was the opportunity. He never liked to listen as much as he liked to eat and to talk, and so that was the most important part of his worship. And David, thank you for relaying that story. I kind of heard it on his side of it, and it's wonderful to hear your side of his. We'll talk about it later. His one-man's crusade, which that's what he declared it to be, in terms of helping people. But so what I want to say first is how important this place is to our family, and this really is a place for love. The last time I had a speaking role here was 1989, and I said, I do, just like my brother. A number of you were here for that, and then a few months later, the church burned down. So forgive me if I'm a little nervous about this structure's future, because I've got even more words to say today. And I don't want to be responsible for fire and brimstone, but I don't think that's part of the Unitarian doctrinaire, so I'm hoping. So we may actually pray today. But while the church burned, my marriage has survived and thrived. Mary and I will be celebrating our 34th anniversary this summer. And when we started dating, we didn't know it, but we both grew up in this church. We were, junior high, middle school, did not attend, too busy with other things like so many kids. But I think it was a foundation for our relationship. The values, centered on community and family, which has been just so wonderful. And all the other incredible things about you, I think that has been, what has been so beautiful about you and about us. And then, as Dan said, he found the love of his life, Heather, who also grew up in this church. And that was 27 years ago, come May, that they were married here. And of course, we knew Heather, we knew Karen very well. We would go over to their house, sometimes for Easter. And of course, we sailed with their father. We sailed, back from Bermuda. And that was the last sailing he ever did. It was such a miserable trip. Not with us, but with the weather. He had enough. But it was really, this church and the people in it have been so important to us. So let me see, where am I here? So this place for love. When I think about it, I wonder kind of, where Dan and I learned our mating rituals. And it was from our father, because he too married a Unitarian. The most incredible woman, still incredible, even with a mask on back there. Stunningly beautiful, intelligent, compassionate about the world, and everybody in it. And the most dedicated and loving mother we could ever I'm going to get it together, you ever imagine. And Mom, you always said that my father was the most interesting man you'd ever met. There were other people in your life, but when you found him, you were just, blown away. You even offered to convert to Judaism for him, is the story, which is not as big a deal for you as it would have been for him if he was Christian, but he followed you instead. And it might be the only time my father ever followed anybody, anywhere. And he became Unitarian too. And the two of you provided the most amazing, enriching, and nurturing home life for Dan and me. And even though, you were, really, tremendously, risk averse, you both, Dad and Mom, grew up in the Depression, and you were incredibly frugal. We didn't go out to eat. We didn't go on fancy vacations. With those sacrifices, you supported Dad, and you gave him the freedom, to quit his job and go without income for, years on end, without a steady paycheck as he developed some of his businesses and his ventures. And, you supported him and you believed in him. And you weren't just, not just a believer, you rolled up your sleeves, you pitched in. And our house was transformed into a true cottage industry. And there are some pictures in the back, and you'll see, the étagère was converted into a traveling, display to go to trade shows. The piano, our little grand piano, was covered with literature. It literally took over the entire house. And you allowed it, encouraged it, and supported it. You maintained the books, and you wrote endless business proposals, brochures, letters for the companies. And I think it was only 20 years, it was 20 years into the marriage that you even discovered that Dad knew how to type. He kept that a secret. And of course, you did everything for Dan and me. Especially when Dad was traveling, which was frequent. He would sometimes go away for 6 weeks at a time, especially in the early 70s, to Japan and Europe, promoting this incredible blood analyzer. But if we fast forward 10 years, Dad is back. Let's see, where am I here? So I guess this was after the two of you got divorced. Dad came back to Old Eagle School Road. He had sailed across the Atlantic, taking us with him. And there's another small business in the house, Alpha Scientific, and again, another business that had taken over the house. And Dad was doing a little dating, and so was Dan. And I think Dan and I, we were kind of more concerned about the people he was dating and what the implications would be. But it's only when he came back to the Unitarian Church to come hear Elizabeth play. I'm not sure if you're playing alone, Elizabeth, in a chamber music group, but it was you. He came, and to this church, and once again he found love. So he found Rena and Joanne, Rena's daughter, who was there, who was a student of Elizabeth, played the piano, and so while not technically a Unitarian, love was found with Rena in this church. And she was another incredible woman, smart, beautiful, funny. And she enriched, Dad's life and all our lives in so many ways. We adored her. And it was also clear that Rena was smitten too with Dad. And Dan and I, we would kind of, look at each other kind of amazed. Dad would do these things that would just drive us crazy. And we could not understand how women find him so adorable. It was, we would cringe, and they absolutely, found him charming. And these were just not run-of-the-mill women. This was my mother. It was Rena. These were impressive people that, again, found him, incredibly charming. So in going through, so many pictures for today, I came across essentially a love letter from Rena to my father. And it was on the back of the menu for the wedding. that they had in New York, and I guess that was in 1995. And if I could ask Betsy to come up and read it. We buried my father this morning, and he's buried next to Rena, and we read this to him there. You can say whatever you want.
Okay. Thanks. Oof, boy. My mom waited a long time to find her true love, and I don't know how hopeful she felt after being single for many years. So it was all the more momentous for her when Marshall came into her life. With Marshall, she felt truly loved and accepted and secure, probably for the first time in her life. And being a part of Marshall's world meant everything to her. I'm so grateful to Marshall for bringing her so much joy. And so grateful to Marshall's kids and their beautiful families for how they accepted my mom into their lives. So to Marshall and to all the Levines, thank you for giving my mom that second chapter of her life. It was a time of laughter and fun and deep love. So I'll finish by reading the words my mom wrote for Marshall on their wedding day, which surely say it best. To my dearest Marshall, you think I married you for your new washing machine, but you're wrong. I'm much more attracted to your refrigerator with its exterior ice dispenser. But at this point in my life, I don't think I'd marry for appliances. No, it's you I love. Your character, your principled response to life, your kindness, generosity, and intelligence. The wit that turns life upside down in its tensest moments makes me laugh and feel safe. I love that you wake up in the morning and look at the light on the leaves, that you see poetry in the stillness of the lake, and that you appreciate and nurture our children and our togetherness. I couldn't have designed a more perfect partner for me, even if I too were an inventor. I treasure our time together and happily anticipate being your wife. Thanks.
I think you can see why we love Rena so much, too. And we're thrilled to have Joanne and John and Betsy here today. But it was after Rena died, Dad. I struggle with saying Dad, or I often just want to call him you. You are crushed as if I'm talking to him. It's when I first came to understand how much you craved people and companionship. I always thought of you as much more of a solitary figure. You did not have a lot of friends. There were not a lot of friends in your life, and it may have been that there just wasn't a lot of room. You were so busy, working, kind of endlessly, and you were so incredibly social. But that was you just didn't have those relationships, but you saved it for us. We definitely had, your time and your energy. But Rena, when she came into your life, she really opened up a whole world to you of friendships that you really cherished, and you were so anxious to find that again. And after Rena passed, you met Harriet, and you quickly got married again. And Harriet had many wonderful qualities, and we grew fond of her as well. But she couldn't match your zest for life, and she wasn't a Unitarian. So that's another message. So now, divorced again, so third marriage, in your mid-80s, you still have an appetite for love. And what do? You come back to the Unitarian Church to find love again. And find Kit, another incredible Unitarian woman. They're all amazing. And so here you are, you strike gold with her. The two of you, you not only survived COVID together, not that you had COVID, but the experience of COVID together. And you thrive in that togetherness. You travel, you sail, you play chess, and you write your memoirs. So initially, I think it was Rena that had got you started. You took a writing class together, and you had written a whole bunch of essays about your life. But it was Kit that encouraged you to put them together in a memoir. And using her publishing skills, you put that in a book. And that was a tremendous gift to all of us, and a tremendous gift to you, because you were not shy in distributing this book. So I don't know if any of you have not received the book from my father, but if you have not, we do have copies out there, and we can always get more. He loved for people to read his book about him. He was not shy. But as I can attest, my brother can attest, my mother can attest, Kit, maybe you too, probably others in this room. My father was not always an easy person to live with or to be with. He had many wonderful qualities, but the relationship with Kit ended, and my father again decides to go back to the Unitarian Church. And you get engaged, this time more platonic. It was an engagement with a discussion group. You rekindled some old friendships that you had that were special to you. Even someone from your bachelor days when you were living in Philadelphia became a friend again. But you still craved more. And if I have the story right, you were in this church, you stood up in the middle of sharing, and you said you'd be coming to this church for 50 years, and nobody had ever invited you out for lunch. That is called Jewish guilt. And most Unitarians are unprepared for it. We had the rest of us with some Jewish background have some experience with Jewish guilt, but it developed a response and a call to arms. And it was Ravi. Where is Ravi? And his family. You really took him in, and you brought him. I'm not sure if you had lunch, but you also had dinners with him, and it was a wonderful relationship that he so cherished. You provided him an opportunity to share his wisdom and to tell you stories. I'm not sure how much, Ravi, you got to speak to him, or was it just him talking to you? But he so appreciated having somebody to listen to him and to be with him, and just really cherished that friendship. So thank you for that. But he decided, Ravi, that even though you had an appetite and an interest in understanding the world in new and different ways, he felt that your background, I guess you did educate him a bit about the caste system in India, but he felt your Western civilization class wasn't up to snuff, or his snuff, and he needed to teach you more about Judaism. He needed to teach you about the important contributions that had been made by his tribe to Western civilization. And then he decided you needed even more comparative religious studies. And he took you on a safari of religions, which at this point he wasn't driving, so I think you drove. And you went down the bottom of the hill to the Quaker meeting. And please, is anybody here from the Quaker meeting? So thank you. So there, he found he found a group of just incredibly welcoming and caring people, and a new friendship and a new audience. I think for us, it's hard to imagine my father ever going to a Quaker meeting, because I just couldn't imagine him to be silent. It is just such a struggle. But I think what you lacked in numbers, you made up in warmth. And he really felt so connected and so appreciative of that community. And this was just, I'm not sure if this was just in September timeframe, fairly recently. And really appreciate it. And so he would, I'm just kind of imagining how my father would think about it. So he lives on the top of Old Eagle School Road, which is the highest point in 5 counties, if you don't know that. And he always thought of himself a little bit like Moses. And so he would be coming down from the mountaintop, right straight down Old Eagle School Road to deliver, his sermon from the mount. He would be delivering his wisdom, his martialisms. And I'm not sure when that opportunity was in coffee hour, but thank you for listening to him, and thank you for welcoming him into your community, and the love. You're part of that circle of love as well that started with this church with Ravi to you guys. So appreciative of that. So I wanted to again, thank you all for loving him, because he really did crave that affection. I'll talk a little bit more later. But it was this fall we had a special treat. So Sarah got married, and her husband, I still have a tough time saying that, William is unfortunately not here, but he was here with Dad at the end, which was so precious, and Dad really adores William. We had this celebration in Marfa, Texas, and if people of you don't know where Marfa, Texas is, you're forgiven. It's in the middle of nowhere. It is 2 flights and a 3-hour drive to get to Marfa, and Dad wasn't going to make it, and my mother wasn't going to make it. And I can't tell you how much that pained me. So what we did is, Sarah and William agreed to have a civil ceremony in New York. They went to the courthouse and got married, and then we had, as far as my father is concerned, the perfect wedding celebration. There was no band, and he got to talk. So we had dinner, and it was, I guess, maybe 13 or 14 of us, just immediate family, and meeting, for him and my mother to meet the Lairds for the first time was really precious. And so at that dinner, he read a poem. And so I think we're actually going to play, we have the video from that, and I can't do it justice, but he can.
Okay, da-da-da-da.
Okay. All right, so I wrote a poem. Okay, it's only 10 lines. Okay. But Moses did very well with his. Okay? And I was named after Moses. Now this poem is strange. So I need your cooperation. This is a reverse poem. This is a poem where you read it down and it says one thing, and you read it back up and it says something else, same words, okay? Don't ever try this at home. They're very hard to write, okay? But now, am I qualified for what I'm going to say? Yes. I had 3 wives, so I know the yin and yangs of marriage. Okay? So the first reading is down. It's not going to be nice, but it gets better. It's called My Dearest. The old-fashioned marriage, with love and compassion, rather a piece self-centered. So reconsider. I suggest that you fend for yourself. May you never need to ask for my help. Are we in this together? What a lie. Marriage turns us inward. Ooh.
Yeah, I'm waiting.
Marriage turns us inward? What a lie. Are we in this together? Ask for my help. May you never need to fend for yourself. I suggested you reconsider self-centeredness. So rather it be with love and compassion, the old-fashioned marriage. My dearest.
Oh, I love that. Bravo.
What? It's like riding a three-dimensional chess game.
Oh my God.
That was perfect. Extraordinary.
few words about our dear friend Marshall. It is really an honor to be here today to share music in his memory. My whole family and I want to express our deepest sympathy to David, Daniel, and the entire Levine family on this loss. We feel very privileged to have known him, my parents and I, and my brother Alex, and I just want to share a little bit about of that story and that history. So I first met Marshall when I was a graduate student at the University of Pennsylvania in history, and he was a senior associate taking classes with the students. And we got to talking, and he told me about his lifelong playing of the clarinet and how he was starting to play the flute. And so I became his teacher, and we became very friendly with the whole family. And then he joined the board of directors of my Dolce Suono ensemble, of which I'm founding artistic director. So we got to work together on a lot of exciting musical projects, and Marshall commissioned 2 of our new works. Wonderful works that we've taken into the chamber music repertoire with us and toured with and recorded. And just to say something about someone who commissions music, it was so clear how much he loved music. He loved playing it. He loved going to concerts. It was just a huge passion of his, as many of you know, and I know a lot of his musical friends are here as well. But someone who commissions new music, helps bring new works of art into the world, it just speaks to his belief in the future of art and inspiration and creativity. And of course, his irrepressible spirit, his joy, his excitement, his creativity. I mean, after all, he was an inventor, right? So I had never taught an inventor flute before, and Marshall being Marshall, I never knew what invention he would bring to every lesson. He would open his flute case, and there would be something that he had added to improve his flute playing or improve the design. He even once had the flute hanging off his ear. Among the many wonderful Marshall stories that we shared in moments, and I know that we will all miss him so much. But his spirit lives on, and that's how I selected some of this music, classic works for flute, like the ones we would have played or studied together, Gluck, Minuet, and Dance of the Blessed Spirits from Orpheus. Also, the energy, the rhythm, the drive of the Bach Badinnerie and Debussy Sering's classic works offered with a lot of love in our hearts today.
Hello, I am Sarah Levine, Marshall's eldest grandchild, actually, I should say. When I was first thinking about what I would say here today, I thought I would attempt my own reverse poem. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to curse in the church, but what the hell? I know my grandfather probably would have. And I quickly found that it was way too fucking hard. I would do it my own way. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not a quitter. I'm simply internalizing one of the many lessons Marshall imparted in the inventive ideas section of his memoir, filed under Lessons Learned, Don't Try It. So instead of a reverse poem, I'm offering up some words and fragmented thoughts to capture the free spirit of my Papa Boo. Like a reverse poem, he was ripe with contradiction. But then again, who isn't? So I'm titling this, For Papa Boo, the real flavor of the highest quality. My grandfather was a complicated man. This could be the only child in him, the son of Helen in him, or the against the odds story ingrained in his bones. Let's remember, his name was Marshall. Life was never going to be easy. He was stubborn and often inflexible. It was usually his way or the highway, but with his grandchildren, occasionally he would make concessions every now and again. Imagining Papa Boo as a recruit shipped off to military training in Georgia and having to comply with arbitrary rules is nearly impossible for me, if not for the photographic evidence that's in the memoir. Just as imagining Marshall as anything but a professional inventor, fixated on improvements for life, is equally or similarly hard for me to imagine. Being his own boss seemed to be the only path for Papa Boo. He was gregarious, and he could border on obnoxious. He was prone to exaggeration. His memoir is speckled with all caps. This made him a hell of a good storyteller, and he could deliver a wicked punchline. He knew how to build suspense and when to pause, whether or not the truth was involved. He would captivate an audience and hold them captive. Whether this was an audience of a few, or one, or a waiter who had the luck of being assigned his table. He claimed to have never read more than 24 books, something he seemed to be very proud of. And yet he managed to pen a memoir and charm or coerce a girlfriend and a granddaughter into typing it up and publishing it. He then proceeded to gift it to all of us and recommended it as a self-help book to others, especially the entrepreneurial type. My grandfather had big ears, even as a little boy, and yet even with these enhanced ears, I wouldn't describe him as an excellent listener, and yet he loved music. So much so that, as Mimi said, he modified hundreds-year-old instruments, arguing that the adjustments improved them tenfold. He also snored loudly at the opera. Yet another sign of his adoration. This was not the only time that he would embarrass his eldest granddaughter. Like his ears, he too had a big and open mind, especially for an atheist. For when it came to religion, as has been discussed here today, he welcomed all denominations, if it meant conversation and donuts afterwards. A Jew, a Unitarian, a Quaker, he didn't discriminate. He subjected everyone to his stories of his life at sea and many failed first businesses. He liked to speak about himself in the third person. And as such, I think perhaps this is why he wasn't very self-aware. And yet he knew how to make himself the butt of any great joke. This made him very hard not to love. He was a discoverer of people and of places. He would speak with anyone who would listen or pretend to listen. And he could make friends anywhere. I mean anywhere, including on the opposite end of the phone. He liked to say that we were the same in this way, and that we both had the chutzpah to bluff our way through life when we needed to. I used to disagree while nodding along. I, for one, never snore at the opera, and I like to think I don't bluff often. But I think in retrospect, he may be at least partially right. We both like to establish connections, and we have the habit of collecting and befriending a hodgepodge of strangers. He was insatiable, with an appetite for food, for people, for the thrill of adventure, for tinkering, and for meddling in the lives of others. My Papa Boo was never boring. He found multiple women to love and to marry. He gave me marital advice because he had expertise in the field. In fact, he gave lots of advice because he had lots of experience, often without any formal subject matter knowledge. Not many can claim to have started 5 companies or to have been awarded 15 patents. Again, I've said this before, but I think someone does need to fact check the memoir at some point and reissue it. He was generous with his life lessons, dishing them out whether or not they were welcome. And similarly generous with removing certain barriers to help others, often strangers, find their foothold and advance. Not many have the opportunity to embrace death the way Marshall did. Not many can survive 3 fallen tree incidents, not to mention a broken mast. In his last weeks, I saw my Papa Boo holding court in the home that he loved, with the views that he loved, in the chairs he loved and lovingly modified, and with the constant blaring ringtone of a cell phone that was relaying even more love. At the end, I know he was ready, and I knew that he felt our love. Not many can claim to have been a flounder girl, as I was called. In my grandfather's second wedding, as we know, there would be more to come. Not many can say that they were delivered to sleepaway camp with their trunk on a sailboat that had traversed the Atlantic and back. Not many can reasonably refer to their grandparent as a crazy inventor in front of their class. No one else, except those in this room, had a Papa Boo. From his flounder girl, forever and always, Sarah, and his grandchildren, Hannah, Noah, Emily, and Sam.
So, no burning yet. So we talked about love before, and now I'm going to talk, bon voyage. Because his life, it was a good life, and it was what a trip, and he brought us all along on it, and what an adventure. It was a beautiful life, and it was, as Sarah said, a beautiful ending. He lived both his life and the ending exactly like he wanted to, in complete control. He was a marvel. He died happy. He was ready. And he was truly satisfied, in all his accomplishments and everything that he had done. And he loved the attention and the affection that so many people bestowed on him. He really, he craved it, and it was a remarkable thing. He really, described it as being at your own funeral, as I said before, and it was something that not a lot of people get to do. But a eulogy is hard for my father because he had done so much. So I actually tried to, in that 2 weeks of his hospice, I tried to engage Sarah and him and Noah and Hannah to write his obituary. And he said, "There's too much to say. Read his book." Always the self-promoter. So, I attempted to put together a eulogy. I don't know if you've opened this up, but they're actually not a eulogy, an obituary. I couldn't even fit it. So there is something in the middle of your program that has his obituary in it. But he wants you to read the book. And again, we've got more books out there, and if you need more, just let me know and I will send them to you. But, oh my gosh, so many adventures. The first one that I remember was camping in French Creek, which is not too far from here. And it was, classic. We pulled up. It was just the two of us. I think, Dan, you were on a trip probably to Cleveland with Mom. And we pulled up in the Oldsmobile station wagon. And it was, of course, you always go camping, and it's always night when you're pitching the tent. So the lights were on. And it was one of those big canvas tents with all the poles that had to connect, and you had to figure out which end connected with which. And so he constructed the tent. And, of course, we're in bed, and it is the storm of the century. Whatever happened last night was nothing. It was pouring so hard. And I think, I'm not sure how old I was at the time. I must have been maybe 5 or so. And I was like, "Dad?" He's like, "Yeah, Dave." I go, "Dad, have you ever been in a storm like this before, Dad? With rain like this?" He's like, "Sure, Dave." "And with thunder like this, Dad?" He goes, "Sure, Dave." "And with lightning?" And the lightning would crackle, and the thunder would crackle, and the lightning would shine up all the trees. And of course he said, "Sure, Dave." And so I went right to sleep. My father was up all night, holding the tent up with a broom that was sagging with the weight of the water. Concerned we could never make it to the Oldsmobile, which was only 30 feet away because it was pouring so hard. And, that was just the start of our adventures. And I learned a lot from that. I learned we could make it through storms together. And I also learned that he was full of shit. He had never been in a storm like that before. And, he could fake it until he made it, too. I think maybe some of his flute playing and clarinet playing the same way. But there were so many activities. When school would be canceled, for snow, the first thing we would do is we would put the skis in the car and head up to the mountains. And he would declare himself a New England driver, because he was from Worcester. And we made it to the slopes, but many times we got stuck in an embankment and we had to wait it out. But skiing, he nearly killed me when he taught me how to ski. We went up the rope tow at Spring Mountain, and he was choking me, holding me up by the neck, going up the hill. But it was an adventure with him and a passion that we still continue in our family. It's so much fun, so many memories of doing those trips with him. And then bicycling. He passed that tradition down to our family. His father, if you've read the memoirs, had been a professional cyclist in Worcester, And I think that gene definitely skipped past my father. But he passed it on to our family, and his grandson Noah has biked across the country twice. So some good strong legs in that gene pool. And then of course sailing. We chartered sailboats. We bought a boat before we even knew really what we were doing, because again we could fake it until we made it. We went around the Chesapeake. We went up all the way to the coast of Maine. We sailed to Bermuda. And then we did the audacious thing of sailing all the way across the Atlantic. It was an incredible adventure. And we have so many stories, so many problems, on those journeys. And I think, we learned, not that we were first-rate sailors, but we were first-rate problem solvers. And we knew we could, whatever happened, we could figure it out. And we had lots of things happen. And it wasn't a sailing trip if we couldn't come back with a story. And I would say that, Dan continues that tradition. He is the only one that has become a first-rate sailor in the family, even way better than my father. Dan held the rank of Commodore of the Philadelphia Sailing Club and has sailed across the ocean again, So that spirit continues. And then there are all these voyages into these various businesses. My father, he was, it wasn't that he was a dreamer, he was a doer. And he was constantly working on something. And, that effort, that problem solving, it was incredible to see. And, again, kind of watching the way he faced obstacles, I think that gave me the confidence and Dan the confidence that we could do anything, but also that it required an incredible amount of effort to accomplish what you wanted to do. It wasn't just thinking about, identifying a problem. It was really effort. So there's so many things in the memoir, but geometric data that brought us to Philadelphia, this incredible microscope using pattern recognition for the first time to identify white blood cells and categorize them. Also, brought us so many stories. He traveled the world to all the major teaching hospitals, and he would come back and he would describe being in traffic in Tehran. This is while the Shah was still there. And how the driver would go backwards through traffic and then through the sidewalk backwards with people jumping out of the way. He had incredible stories. He had, according to him, saved world peace by reducing trade tensions between the U.S. and Japan. He had been treated to a geisha dinner and sat on the same chair that Kissinger did. So he had quite some incredible experiences. And we had visitors in our house from all over the globe. There were Germans, there were, incredibly number of people came through. And Dan and I, we learned how to sumo wrestle. We would disrobe only in our underwear, and we would spread salt in the living room, and we would battle our father, running up against him. And then there was thermal data, which took over the house. And again, Mom, you let it happen, and it was an incredible experience. And it was the best and only MBA that I received. You really got to see business, up close and what it meant, and you saw how he did it. And then there was Newmar, and you included us, in everything. I went on a trip to Israel with you. There was a group of immigrants from Russia that were the most outstanding scientists in that field in the world at the Weizmann Institute, and you cajoled them and convinced them to join the team to develop this NMR tool using nuclear magnetic resonance to put a tool down oil wells to look for oil. An incredible technical feat. And again, your ability to make people join you was really remarkable. And then finally, there's Alpha Scientific. And you and Dan had started the company, and then you welcomed me to join, and we came back from Dallas. And it's been 30 years that has financially supported all of us, but has also enabled my children to come back and really know their grandparents in a way they would have never known. and have been such an incredible part of their life, including, of course, my father. And again, it is that tenacity which I think is so impressive. Now, this is, a little bit like an element of the reverse poem without any poetry, but this is the not so good part that will get better. You described your mind. I think it was John, Bielenson, my good friend who came over. For the first time I ever heard you describe it this way, it was like a matrix where, some people read books and that they absorb knowledge. And of course, we know you never read books, but that your mind was pre-programmed and waiting for the information. You knew what you wanted to learn, and when you learned it, you had a place for it. And you knew where to put it and then how to get it. And I think that was part of your genius. That was your framework. But for me, I spent my life trying to stop you from locking these pegs into this matrix, realizing that once it got locked in, you could find it again and you would never let it go, because sometimes, the pegs didn't fit correctly in terms of how you thought about, some people and some subjects. You also made me incredibly angry, probably more than anyone else in my life. I was one of the few people that would stand up to you and tell you that you were wrong. I'm my father's son, and I probably thought that I'm always right too, but that was a challenge for the two of us. You struggled to listen. I think it was in your 70s that you declared you had attention deficit disorder, and we should be kinder to you. And that your attention deficit disorder, it was because you were too attentive to your own thoughts. So we had to kind of swallow, but it's true. You were living in your own head so much of the time, and you really couldn't hear us, and that was a challenge. It was a challenge. And you often really did think you were Moses, as you heard before. And what we took as suggestions, you believed to be commandments, coming down from on high with supreme insight. And you would be insulted if they weren't heeded. So much wise wisdom there too, but those were not always suggestions. You could be cruel and hurtful, sometimes without realizing it, and sometimes with intent. And that's also, part of who you were. But you were also amazing. Incredibly generous with us and with strangers. You were brilliant, so eloquent, unconventional in your thinking, and created, just absolutely unique solutions. And yes, made me angry at times, but you also made me so proud and so grateful to have you as my father. So the last voyage, this is short, is this voyage into death. And you had thought philosophically about death for a long time, about how to think about it, what rights patients have. And this was something that you would play with ideas and try them on people and try them on us. And this last year was a hell of a year. I have lost track of the number of ER visits, hospitalizations, surgical procedures, and countless specialists. I keep saying, I think this last year in my life, I was more exhausted than any other year with the 3 kids, even when they were little. It was an incredibly busy year. And you're, when you were at your fighting weight, you were about 210, and you were down to about 140. And most of it was fluid, from the liver. And it was a struggle. And you periodically would decide that, you know what, maybe it's enough. And then you would kind of rally and decide to do, the next treatment and the next surgical procedure, putting in a watchman, doing all kinds of crazy things. But when you decided that you had enough, you were absolutely resolute. And you said, that's it. And you said, I'm not going to eat or drink. Which is a hard thing to contemplate from a guy that would go to the restaurant and ordered a sandwich while his dinner was coming because he was so hungry. He loved food. But it was amazing to see. You were in complete control. And, I got to think, 89 years old, all that you've done, what a way to go out, to be able to call people, to have people come and visit. It was so beautiful. And I got to hear so many other ends of that conversation, and how many people just absolutely adored you and the impact that you made in their lives. You loved being at your own funeral. And the last thing you asked me before you fell asleep, he died on a Thursday, it was Wednesday night. I think he only started taking some morphine, I think it was that Wednesday. I think that was it, because he wanted to be clear-headed for the palliative care doctor who had just read his book and might have some questions for him. No lie. So the last thing, before you fell asleep on that final night where, you were still, present, you asked me, we live on Old Eagle School Road, which is a very busy street, and you asked me if it was raining outside. And I said, no, Dad, it's just the traffic on Old Eagle. And then you asked me if it was lightning outside. And I said, no, Dad, it's just the light from the cars. And then I realized you were still as alert as ever. We were back in that tent. And I got to hold his hand, and it was beautiful. Tell him I loved him. And gonna miss him immensely, but what a life, what a life. All right.
We'd like to make some space now for those not on the program but who feel moved to share. I invite you just to share a memory, a word of affection, a word that deserves to be said. And I have a mobile mic, so you can do it right in your seat unless you wish to come forward. But if you put your hand up, I'll come and I'll even hold the microphone for you. Okay? I'm going to come in the tour here, so I'm going to hold for you.
Thanks. My name's Scott Barton. I've been good friends with Dave since we went to Duke University together. And I'd like to say a few words, but I'm representing all of our Duke crew as I say this. I was fortunate to get to share these words in Marshall's last day, so I'm just going to read to you what I read to him. Captain, my captain, I believe the ultimate measure of a captain is less the voyages he sailed and more the effect he has had on his many crews. And while I had only brief stints with you, your impact on me was immense, and I speak for the entire Duke Wayne Manor contingent when I offer this tribute. I first met you on the fall break sailing trip when you took a bunch of us landlubber Dukies around the Chesapeake Bay. From the moment we arrived to help prepare the aptly named Free Spirit to sail, your infectious spirit of adventure and commitment to bring us up to muster inspired us to both play freely but simultaneously embrace our active role in making the adventure. You were our nautical guide, but more importantly, you were our spiritual guide on our discovery and self-discovery voyage. This was no fall break trip. This was an awakening adventure for all of us that we still discuss warmly to this day. We bonded, we laughed, we dreamed in a way that was transformative. Just as small course corrections in sailing can have important implications on reaching one's destination, you were a beacon of course correction for me. It's easy in life to get gravitationally drawn closer to doing what one is expected to do rather than breaking free and charting one's own path. Even if our conversations were brief and sporadic, you always served as a beacon to listen to one's own voice, to tune out the noise and be mindful of what would really make a difference, and not be afraid to take the road not met, not just less traveled, but never traveled. But if I may use another sailing analogy, you were a major mentor for finding one's own sextant and having the courage and restless spirit to follow it. You made an outside difference in this world, my captain, and I am but a minor example of the people that you shaped. I hope you can feel proud and appreciate the legacies that you will leave. I'll end with a snippet from my book review of your memoir, which I hope captures the impact. Marshall Levine chronicles how his restless curiosity interacts with the rigid frameworks of the world around him, leading to a lifelong journey of accelerated questioning and discovery. Whether tempting the gods of the sea or tilting at the windmills of bureaucracy, Marshall personifies how cleverness, pluck, and a relentless seeking of complementary and serendipitous kindred spirits can lead to soaring achievements. His life lessons serve as a beacon to other innovators of how to not get trapped into accepting the norms they see around them, but instead to rise up and beat a new path. Forever your crewman, Scott.
Thank you.
I met Marshall maybe 3 years ago or less. I don't remember exactly the date, but I remember something very very charming about this gentleman. I met him here at the Unitarian Church coffee hour, and he said, Unitarians don't believe in lunch together. So I said, well, let's go out to lunch. So that's how our friendship began. So we were sort of out at lunch together, guys, and a conversation with him reminded me more of the Matterhorn at Disneyland. It was, wow, what an experience. He has such a fantastic mind. I've never met anyone in my whole life that had such a mind as his. Now, of course, you have to remember people like Thomas Edison had a fantastic mind too, and they weren't the most perfect people in their relationships. They had to sacrifice something, obviously. The creative people are in their own mind. They're not paying attention to a lot of people. But anyway, I remember when he came to the church for lunch and gave his talk about how he helped people, everyday people. He would meet waitresses. He would help them elevate their life. And I think that was a fantastic contribution he's made to our society, besides all the inventions and stuff that he created. Thank you.
I choose to speak up front.
You want to speak up front?
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Yes, I'll make it short, Marshall. He's looking at me. He knows. I met Marshall in 2008 in, obviously, music chamber ensemble, since I happen to be a classical concert pianist. And not only was he a gentleman, he went to the beat of his own drum, but also he was very persuasive regarding as to how things should go or things shouldn't. But at the same time, he became part of involved. And I know that it was mentioned here earlier that sometimes he could be full of shit, but it doesn't really matter, because in the long run, guess what? That guy went out there and tried different things, as it was said here also before. Not only was he a great person, he was also a great humanitarian. And through him, I've met a lot of connections regarding music networking, as well as helping me out in different ventures with advice, with having connections, and meeting other people. And one thing that Marshall and I spoke about was people who appreciated him and people who didn't. And over the years, he's told me so much, a whole lot, as to the people who really enjoyed his company or those who didn't. But in the long run, I'm happy that I'm actually one of those people, as well as my mother, that appreciated his company. And those that didn't appreciate him, it really doesn't matter. Because in the long run, he succeeded in whatever he did and everything that he did. We must appreciate people when they're alive, not when they're dead. That's very important. That's a lesson for everyone to learn. Thank you.
Go ahead. Why don't you go ahead up, and we're going to hear first here. I'm going to hold on to this man.
Thank you. I am Lorraine Herrincole, the mother of Marin Levine. So David is my son-in-law. And when Marin and David were becoming sort of serious, still beyond high school, but in that era, we thought it was a good idea that we would meet David's parents formally. So we had a Thanksgiving dinner at our home for Marin, David, and family to come together and we'll meet everybody. Well, it turned out to be a very interesting event because the turkey I bought was the butterball turkey. It was a very big one, and it was very frozen when I tried to put it in the oven to cook at the afternoon of that Thanksgiving day. So people came, no food. Marshall, of course, is making comments about having no food. He suggested I fill up the bathtub with hot water, but we would have to measure the temperature of the water. Of course, that would be a certain temperature to dissolve the icing around it. But we didn't have the kind of bathroom that would work very well for that, so we ended up just putting it in the oven, but not until we had called the Butterball Turkey Company at Marshall's request. Now, I happen to have saved the wrapping of the turkey, and it did have 1-800-Butterball on it. And Marshall kept saying, call the company, call the company. I called that number and only got a security guard on Thanksgiving Day. So we put the turkey in the oven and had turkey dinner at 9 o'clock.
Good afternoon. My name is Bill Nuremberg. I'm from Baltimore. I came up with my wife today to pay tribute to Marshall. Marshall Levine was a very good friend for around 20 years. We enjoyed music at Tanglewood in the summer. We drove the entire circumference of Chesapeake Bay in 13 days just a few years ago. And we would enjoy endless meals of his favorite fresh off Lancaster Avenue lobsters at his house, and all kinds of cuisine in Lenox, Massachusetts, in Baltimore, in Philadelphia, in Easton, in Annapolis, Chestertown, and Rock Hall, and many stops in between. After I had a stroke 4.5 years ago, we would meet for lunch both off and on Interstate 95. We did that so neither one of us would have to drive a long distance. We would usually meet in one of the many quaint places along the way, such as the town of Northeast. I don't know if you ever heard of that one. Chesapeake City, Havre de Grace, many places in between. We had a number of favorite joints in these places where we ate often, and usually they were near the water. Sometimes I would bring lunch with me, and we'd eat at rest stops, but never in their restaurants. I would bring him brisket or corned beef sandwiches, chopped liver and dill pickles from Lenny's on Reisterstown Road in Baltimore, which he always gobbled with glee. And Diet Coke was his beverage, and in great quantities. We discussed politics for a long time, but then we stopped because he was convinced the country would be disintegrating pretty soon, and I could never convince him otherwise. I loved talking to him about his inventions, and he constantly tinkered with all kinds of adaptations to help him play his flute or his clarinet better. But alas, I was no help. He had the keen mind of an engineer, always looking for a way to get certain things done, always with precision. He even invented a great blood analysis machine that my wife used at her laboratories at both UCLA and Johns Hopkins, and for years. But when we tried to play duets, Marshall and me, I had to give up because he had trouble. This wonderful inventor and creator, this wonderfully precise mind, he had trouble counting to 4. Marshall, you're not counting the beats of each measure. He also wanted tempos to slow down so that he could be more comfortable playing the difficult passages that we encountered. But of course, when he slowed down, he never asked anyone else to slow down. So as a result, the music went on and Marshall didn't. He loved to cook after a fashion. He created a number of dishes that were like his inventions, a more streamlined way to get the desired results. But I will leave this topic because I should listen to my urges today to be merciful and kind. We had many ups and downs. For a number of years, we would speak every day on the phone. We watched his third marriage sadly crumble, his numerous attempts over those years to find just the right person, when in fact he had already found that person in his second wife, who was unfortunately gone before I met him. But there were lots of traces of her on the bookshelves in his guest room. Kit Burns and I helped him, and along with his granddaughter Sarah, to assemble and publish his biography, which I think is a hilarious book. And by the way, Sarah, it doesn't have to be accurate to be funny. I still treasure that book. And if you haven't read it, I know there's a large box of them out there in the lobby. So, David, I'm sure everyone should take a copy. His last year or two could not have been wonderful. Mother Nature closed in on him, and he decided the fight was not worth the cost to his quality of life. So he did the Marshall thing. He devised his departure so that all his friends and colleagues could wish him off, just like they did when he and his sons sailed the Atlantic and the Mediterranean. He called me and we talked at length on the Tuesday before he left us. I told him a couple of days before that he was embarking on yet another one of those voyages, one of those great journeys. But he knew better, and he let it be. His life was full. He was generous, witty, and a charmer. I have a feeling he's looking down on us now and laughing today, waiting for us to go eat together somewhere and pull out the napkin holders he designed. You all know about those. No meal was ever complete without one of those napkin holders. Wherever he is, I hope the food is good because he deserves it. He was the big brother I always wanted, but never had.
For a final word, I'd like to invite Marin Levine forward to close our time of sharing.
These when I got married up here on the pulpit in 1989, but I do now, just like you do. I guess I'm the closer, and I thank everybody for being here for a long time today and sharing so many of those great stories and words of wisdom about Marshall. Marshall entered my life at age 17. David and I had been dating for a short time when one Thursday night, after a Conestoga High School Interact meeting, as we were both seniors in high school, Dave decided to take me to his house. His family, clearly unprepared for my visit, were doing their normal things. I walked into the den to find Marshall clad only in his favorite tall black socks that went all the way up to his kneecaps and his underwear. That was it. Somehow I was way more embarrassed than he was, but little did I know that this moment in time would explain a personality trait that would prevail for my entire stint as daughter-in-law, spanning almost 40 years. Marshall Levine was unabashed and shocking. Marshall spent a lifetime unabashed and shocking those around him. As I left adolescence, I came to see him in many complicated lights and began to understand that he too was imperfect, just like all of us. Marshall was the perfect dad who was loving, took pride in his boys' achievements, always included his kids in his adventures, had a wicked sense of humor from Worcester, Massachusetts, and as you heard, could tell a story like no one else. He was kind and generous, but then there were the buts. But he could also be gruff, demanding, and even insensitive at times, perfecting the art of couching compliments with slights, like the time he told me that my new haircut would beautifully take me into old age. Well, I was only 29 at the time, and that wasn't a compliment. I cried for a few hours after he left. I resented his lack of interest in remembering his sons' and grandkids' birthdays each year. I never understood how he could just fall asleep at the dinner table in the middle of conversation, and was often embarrassed at restaurants when he would ask for multiple cups of coffee at the same time, where the second and third cups would come and he would demand a saucer to put over those so they didn't get cold. And as Dave alluded to, if a meal ordered was taking longer to arrive than he wanted, he'd often ask the waitstaff for a tuna salad sandwich while he waited. More than once, after he paid for the meal, I'd run back into the kitchen to find our poor waiter and tip them extra for my father-in-law's peculiarities. Unabashed and shock. Marshall truly was a conundrum to me. In the midst of his perfections, I was also in awe of his generosity, the countless ways he would help those he came to care about, to do good and offer remedy, both family and friends. But of all Marshall's good deeds, I find myself most appreciative of the son he created and shared with me. He grew an amazing boy. David has so many of his dad's good qualities: his creativity, his caring about others, his incredible steadfastness in seeking the answer and not giving up in solving complex problems, as annoying as that can be to me at times. I will be forever grateful to Marshall for these gifts he bestowed on his son and in turn gifted to me. I love you, Dave. I suppose it's incredibly fitting that Marshall left us 17 days ago in the same sartorial fashion I was introduced to him at age 17. You're getting the picture. Marshall chose to say goodbye and leave this world wearing just his socks and briefs. They weren't his signature tall black socks, and his underwear had along the way changed to Depends, but socks and briefs nonetheless, unabashed and always with a bit of shock, even to the very end. Goodbye, Marshall, Papa Boo. Thank you so much.
thank you. I met Marshall when he was clarinetist, and he was transitioning to become a flutist, and that was a trip. Whoever spoke about his inability to count, I was with him in several ensembles with 2, 3, 4, 5 people, and if one of them doesn't count, it doesn't work. And finally, this memorable statement, he said to me one day, "I'm paying you guys to stay with me," and that was fine. Then.
Invite Keith forward for the final piece. You can take your place. As you leave here, I wish to leave you with a charge or two. One charge is that there are more stories to tell. I feel it. I feel there are 100 stories in this room of Marshall, your life together, what it meant. And the time for sharing has not ended. So when you go out these doors, you have a space in this house to tell your story. Stories give life. And as great storytellers know, like Marshall, the way you tell a story can make all the difference. The way you tell your story can change the world. It can change the lives of the people around you. So as we go from this place of remembering, go into a world of storytelling. When you gather together at the family dinner table, do as we will do when we gather together at coffee hour here every Sunday. We will remember and we will tell stories with laughter and generous hearts. And so, my friends, go in peace. May you carry with you the legacy that Marshall has left. May you have some audacity in your life. May you know who you are and be unafraid to live it. May you be curious about others around you. Share who you are and what you think. Offer what you have to offer. Do it with compassion and do it with love. Go now in peace.
Thank you.